let's get into governance then, on sort of the fractal level here. You've made references in prior conversations about Game B to this concept of liquid democracy. Do you think that a liquid democracy, or even democracy itself, would be necessarily the primary form of governance in these, let's say, social ecosystems?
This is a very good question. The answer is we don't know. I would say that I doubt that democracy is the right way to run a community of 150 people. Mm-hmm. There may be sometimes some special issues for which democracy is the last resort. But in general, in a community of 150 people, are going to want to operate by consensus mostly, and that's how the Israeli kibbutzes have done it. And one of our Game B folks, Forrest Landry, has come up with a very interesting hybrid, which I love. And I got to say, I've taken his idea and I've extended it beyond which he is comfortable with. So this is this is from his core idea, small group practice, and I have hijacked it and bent it beyond what he's willing to stand behind. So don't blame Forrest for this. But take a small group practice idea, which is you first go into consensus. Let's say you want to figure out how to manage the farm. Say we have a 200-acre Proto-B, of which about 100 acres is farmland. And so we go into consensus, basically everybody one person, and you need essentially all agreement, though we've also developed a Game B concept called rough consensus, that if consensus won't happen after enough time, then we can go to a vote, but it's got to be like 75 or 80%, super majority as a rough consensus. And the job of the consensus is to build the executive. So is to define what the executive in charge of agriculture does, what are their responsibilities, how are they funded, and who are the people that are appointed into those positions, and then how do they replicate themselves? Maybe they just, if one of them quits, the survivors just appoint another one. That would be the classic way it happens in the not-for-profit world. But whatever mechanism, the consensus designs the executive. The executive then goes and just does its thing, typically would have reporting requirements back to the community as a whole. And they are not subject to oversight. They're not subject to votes. The decision of what to plant each year never comes before the general meeting, et cetera. But the general meeting, the consensus, has one power and one power only, which is what I call to press the red button and dissolve the executive, which then pushes the problem back to the consensus organization with the charge to define a new executive. And you didn't like the way that one was working, and truthfully, it might be as small as just changing the personnel. Maybe we're happy with the structure, but it turns out the three people running it are all assholes for whatever reason. We didn't know it at the time, so we press the red button. We say, all right, we like the structure, but we're appointing these three people to be the new leaders of the agriculture executive. And then the agriculture executive goes off and does its thing with regular reporting, but no democratic oversight. That's an example that I think could work. And I think it's real important to say could, because all these ideas, including my pet idea of liquid democracy, are unproven at scale and would be dangerous to assume that they would work. And again, this is a very big Game B thing. Like we call it epistemic humility or modesty, is don't think you're smarter than you actually are. When it comes to dicking with complex adaptive systems, our ability to predict what will happen with any significant intervention is a hell of a lot smaller than we think it is. So take relatively small steps, be empirical, be prepared to back off or modify if you find that what you're doing doesn't work.
Yeah, well, so this is an interesting point of contention here, is the sort of the difference between the emphasis on design versus iteration. So sort of the hot thing, especially if you're more of like a tech-minded Silicon Valley type, is, well, we don't need to actually plan anything out. We don't even need to know what our product is going to be. We're going to sort of find product market fit as we go along. And everything is just about increasing the rate of iteration. Again, hearkening back to Thiel, just because he's been sort of an influence on me intellectually over the last few years, he sort of pushes against this in the opposite direction. He says, well, there's too much emphasis on sort of blind iteration. You need actually more careful, thoughtful, thorough planning and directedness, which would be sort of more in the design space. How do you think about sort of the trade-offs between iterating and design?
Very good question. One of my favorite topics. If you don't mind, I'm gonna take a break here and get a can of
sure.
something to drink. Yeah, that's a very important question. And the meta answer is they're all talking about the wrong thing. Because there are times when you want one and times when you want the other. I've been involved with 20 early stage companies as either a founder, actually an employee for only one of those that I learned is a hell of a lot better to be with something besides an employee. Founder, investor, advisor, member of the board of directors. So I've seen lots of these things up front, and I know of lots of other ones. And we've actually looked at this at the Santa Fe Institute to some degree. And there's actually a mathematical theorem that's important here called the no free lunch theorem, which basically says there is no one right way to search, right? And a business is a search algorithm on the coevolutionary fitness landscape of other businesses that are out there, essentially, right? That's all a business is, a search algorithm, right? And it's important to think about it that way. And the no free lunch theorem says there is no one algorithm that's optimal. And this is clearly the case in business. I can give you, two different, completely different examples of companies I've been involved with. One is a relatively lightweight app for helping you improve your sovereignty in the game B sense. That helps you lower the gap between intention and action. And truthfully, while there's some very interesting back-end things going on, the most important part is that it's really easy to use and and it also has social built into it. And it's really easy to use, and that the social actually does what it's supposed to do. This is a perfect example for a perfect case for fast iteration, learning and constantly changing, and either we'll figure it out or we won't. There's no way to figure this out in advance. Other extreme, another one of my companies that we ended up selling, had a nice successful effort, was software for designing computer chips. In particular, this last one we did two companies for computer chip design, was to optimize chip design for manufacturability. Because we're now getting down to the level of these traces on the chips, 4 nanometers, now they're going to 2, where quantum mechanics actually become a significant factor in what happens on the chip. And there's 2 problems. One, does it work at all? But then if you can solve that problem, which we could not solve, that was not in our charter, was all right, now you got one that works, but its yield is only going to be 50 or 60% because it's dealing with all this quantum parasitism. Can you do something to move 50 or 60% good chip yield to 80 or 90% good chip yield? Turns out there are some things you can do using some very advanced technologies, kind of at the maniac edge. I'm not going to. I guess I could tell now since we sold the company. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We assume it's magic shit that took us 6 or 7 years to get right. This was research, planning, listening to customers, yes, but mostly just working really hard to figure out how to solve this world-class fucking problem. And the other antithesis of sort of a light social where ease of use and getting the social right is important. And so there's no one answer to it. Peter Thiel's absolutely right. If you want to build Palantir, you can't do it in 1 week agile sprints. On the other hand, someone that does a 1 year plan using 1970 style waterfall design for a lightweight social app is a fucking idiot, right? So I say nobody is correct who says there's one way to think about it. All depends on the problem domain. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially to take it up a level. Where are you in the coevolutionary fitness landscape? What is the nature of the problem that's actually of economic value? And is it a problem that is for which rapid but shallow iteration is the right thing to do? Or is it something that 5 years of ball busting work? Oh, another company that I haven't actually taken a formal position with, but might, quantum computing. Mm-hmm. Again, this is deep think. It'll be 4 years before they even have a prototype, right? This is not about, agile, and all this is deep thinking. So there ain't no right answer. Don't believe anybody who says there is. Look at the co-evolutionary fitness landscape where you're at. What's the most important driver of the business you're trying to do, and what kind of goals, structure, and methods will help you solve that one or two hard problems that will make or break this company in that co-evolutionary fitness landscape.
Yeah, so really about being extremely keyed into, fitness as such, and making it as closely aligned with the proper description of the problem actually becomes actually way more important.
Yeah, and understanding, because any business that's likely to succeed is trying to solve no more than two problems, right? Real problems. There's a lot of recombination, getting things right. But in fact, I prefer one hard problem. Solve one hard problem and are reasonably intelligent on your recombination. And assuming the problem is one of actual economic value, you will be successful if you have a good team.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask, while we're still on the topic of entrepreneurship, if there are some problems that can't be solved in this sort of Dunbar level, group size, maybe they take larger human scales of mobilization in order to get fixed. I'm thinking, what you're talking about there with the microchip technology probably involves, orders of magnitudes of complicated, human machinery that sort of has to come together to make something like that happen. Do you think that as something that is compatible with these Game B setups? Are you imagining sort of networks of Game B proto communities that sort of horizontally communicate?
Yeah, horizontally, vertically, mesh networked. Let's take a chip manufacturing plant, because that's a really interesting example. There's no way to make, that we know of today, to make 2 nanometer chips other than in a $10 billion plant, right? And one could imagine a $10 billion plant owned by Game B with hundreds of Proto-Bs around it, right? And a bunch of, maybe a quarter of the people on each Proto-B works at the plant, right? Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly reasonable. Now, in terms of other kinds of problems, let's say we wanted to build a competitor, a better Facebook, right? Nothing like Facebook. Right? Well, it can start small. It's actually not that hard a technical problem. As it grows, it's going to need thousands and tens of thousands of people working at it. And the organization, the Game B venture, can have filaments that reach out all over the place into all the other Proto-Bs, and oh, by the way, into Game A. Nothing that says that a Game B venture has to only employ Game B people, right? And so, one should not think that a Game B venture overlays one-to-one on a Proto-B, because there's many, many interesting problems for which, and we say 150 people, frankly, the number that might be available to work on a venture is 30, 40, or 50 at the most, right? The rest are going to be involved in, just making a living, doing a local job, running the auto repair business, or working on the farm, or doing the laundry, et cetera. So we by no means assume that the limit of a Game B venture is, any given Proto-B. It's basically all of Game B plus whatever we want to bring in from Game A. So we're prepared to take on any problem of any size, but not right now.